Hello everyone, this is Nitpicking Nerd, and this is a quick review of Andor, which at first I didn't really like. This whole idea of the show is basically taking a character that we saw in Rogue One, who in my opinion wasn't really that interesting, and making him the star of this TV show. And the first few episodes also had poor pacing, it felt kind of boring. Everything was progressing way too slowly. It also lacked those entertaining Star Wars elements like, exotic aliens and comedy and fantasy elements. All those entertaining things about the Star Wars universe felt kind of lacking in the show. It all felt really serious and grim and gritty, which some people really like, and I don't have a problem with it. I just felt as if it's not really Star Wars, it's kind of something else, it's just using the name of Star Wars. That's what I thought at first, at least. And my biggest problem was the pacing, that everything was just moving too slowly, and yet it was still good enough that it kept me watching, and the show did start getting more and more interesting. It has some intricate political stuff, and the whole starting of the rebellion and all of that. It's all mostly done really well. And the show also is kind of weird about how the technology is advanced and yet primitive at the same time. It often feels like watching the partisans fighting against Nazis and stuff like that. So it's all kind of gritty and realistic looking, and yet kind of too much, because isn't it still supposed to be in the Star Wars universe? So for example, they go around tying up the officers of the Empire, and they can either shoot them or tie them up. And I kept thinking, why don't they have those stun guns which we saw back in A New Hope, that it's possible to stun people, and yet they don't seem to have that here. And so often they're kind of lacking even the technology that we saw existing in this universe, and yet they don't have it. And so it all feels kind of strange how it's kind of too primitive. And also the radios they use are like old style radios of the previous century of today, and so it all feels kind of too primitive. And it was always the Star Wars style of having like a retro future, that things in the future are still similar to things of the past. Even the lightsabers is like a futuristic weapon, and it's like the swords of the past, and the Han Solo being like a cowboy and all of that. So it always had those elements of all kinds of things from the past, only in a science fiction version of them. So I get that it's deliberate, and at the same time it was kind of too primitive in the show, in my opinion. It was almost distracting at how primitive it was. And even when they show the capital of the galaxy on Coruscant, it all looked like kind of an old style Soviet city, like everything. I did like the dystopian feel of it. I did like how the show is showing us why the Empire is bad, how the way people live in the Empire is really oppressive and dystopian and all of that. So I did enjoy those elements, and I'm glad they finally do something like this, because up until now we never really saw why the Empire is so evil. Like we do know that the Emperor is evil because he's an evil wizard and all of that, but aside from that, we never really saw why the people of the galaxy hate the Empire. What did the Empire actually doing to people to make people hate them? I mean, up until blowing up Alderaan, in which it became obvious that they're genocidal maniacs who will blow up planets for resisting them, but aside from that, we never really saw it directly why the Empire is hated and all of that. And yet now we see that it is oppressive, it is dystopian, it is putting people into slave labor and stuff like that. And so that was the point in which I started loving the show, when they showed how the justice system is totally corrupt and unfair and doesn't care about human rights and all of that. So Andor is basically arrested for nothing, just for being in the wrong place, and they show us the justice system, how the judge just passes the sentence in a few seconds without any opportunity to defend itself, and she tells him, take it with the Emperor. So that was a nice line. And then he's sent to prison, which is basically a dystopian nightmare, really similar to that old movie THX 1138, which was a George Lucas movie. So I guess that was a deliberate homage to that. In that movie, all the prisoners are wearing white and all the guards are in black, and all their routine is tightly controlled and all of that. And a lot of other movies also imitated that style. There was that movie The Island, made by Alex Kurtzman, which was also really similar to that idea. And the original movie THX 1138 did have a lot of great ideas, but the execution of them wasn't really that good. So I'm not necessarily against taking those same ideas but making them better execution, better effects and all of that. So anyway, that's kind of what they did with these few episodes in which he was in this labor camp, in which everyone are wearing white. And it also added new fresh ideas which we didn't see before. Like the idea that all the floors are used to electrocute people who disobey, so they all have to walk without shoes, except the guards who have special shoes to protect them, and they can electrocute everyone anytime they want. So that's kind of a fresh idea. It is similar to that prison that we saw in the movie Face Off, in which everyone were wearing boots. So it's kind of similar but different, and so it all felt fresh despite having those same old ideas that we saw before. But it's all done in a new way which feels totally fresh and also done really well. I really enjoyed these episodes, and it has that creepy dystopian feeling, and it serves as a nice build-up for a satisfactory resolution. Like when they finally escaped from there, it was really epic, really tenseful. All of those things worked really well because they kind of set it all up really well with an emotional investment in all of it. And so when it finally reaches a boiling point, it's really epic. And so I really enjoyed those episodes. And Andy Serkis was absolutely amazing in it. And I liked how his character is basically like Moses in the end, because it turns out he cannot swim and all the others swim away to safety and he has to stay behind and just look at them. That's kind of like Moses after liberating his people. He himself doesn't go to the promised land in the end. He has to just watch from the side. It's kind of also similar to the character that he also played in Planet of the Apes, the character of Caesar, who liberates all the other apes, but in the end he just watches them go to their promised land, but he has to watch from the side. So that's all kind of deliberate biblical references, I think, just classic hero stuff, and it makes his character here much more heroic, because now that we know that he always knew that he himself personally will not be able to escape, and yet he helps all the other ones to escape, that makes him much more heroic in the end. And so that was all really great in my opinion. So that's the point in which I realized that this is indeed a great show. The first few episodes I still think were kind of too slow and boring. And also I like that the show does leave some mystery. It doesn't explain every little detail. There are some things that they kind of leave open. Maybe that character of Andy Serkis who remains in that prison, he's the last one who cannot escape. Maybe as punishment he will be sent to some genetic research facility and they will use his body or his DNA to create those clones of Snoke or something. So that will be kind of a nice tie-in. I don't expect them to do it, and maybe they shouldn't do it, but it's just nice how it's possible. Like they left it open, that it can be used as a plausible theory to tie everything together, because he was the one behind the character of Snoke with the CGI, but he was the one voicing him and playing him. So it's kind of neat how they set up the ending of this character here to possibly connect with that without explicitly saying it in any way, but it's kind of possible. So that's interesting in my opinion. And I think some of the other guys we saw in that prison, in that labor camp, were also some of the rebels that we saw in Rogue One. So that's another good attention to detail. And it's nice that they finally showed us why people hate the Empire. They finally showed us all the injustice, all the cruelty, and they never revealed to us what exactly were they building in that factory, and how come they just don't use droids to build things. Like, what's the point of using slave labor when you don't have to? So there are still some iffy questions regarding technology and stuff like that, all kinds of little things that don't really make much sense. But because it's all so entertaining and well made, I'm willing to forgive it. And the attention to detail in a lot of things is great to make it feel like a prequel to the original Star Wars movies. And yet with good special effects and good props at the same time. So that's really challenging. That's something I wish that Star Trek would have done with its prequels. Whenever Star Trek is making prequels, they just ignore the way things are supposed to look in that time period, except maybe some small similarities, but they don't really care about making it align correctly. And yet in Star Wars they do care about small details like that, making things look like it's in the same universe and all of that. So I do appreciate it. That's something I wish Star Trek would have been more careful about. So anyway, that's my opinion. So I do really enjoy the show. I hope it keeps getting better and better, and that's really all I had to say about it for now. Let me know what you think, and we can discuss all of this in the comments below. And I will see you all next time. Bye bye.